invite the press into that room to talk about the executive orders he was signing and what he intended to do for the country for the next 4 years. So I think we have never seen this level of transparency and accessibility, and the press who cover the White House beat every day, they will tell you, maybe not on the record, but they'll tell you off the record that we allow them in, we welcome them in our offices, we talk to them on a daily basis. You see them going into the Oval Office on a near daily basis to talk to the president. And we have welcomed so many new voices into the White House press briefing room as well. So I do believe that we've absolutely held to that promise, and we intend to continue to do so.
Karoline, what do you like best about legacy media reporters and least?
This is a good question. Look, there are reporters who have covered the White House beat for a very long time, and they have institutional knowledge. I think it's fascinating to talk to them about the administrations of the past and all of the presidencies that they have covered, and to hear the differences amongst the presidencies. And again, one of the major things learned from the legacy media is just how it's changed and evolved in that room, and how different it is, their experiences from the last 4 years under the previous administration, who did not talk to them, who did not take questions in the same fashion that we do every day.
This administration uses the phrase fake news a lot, especially on social media. What % of the news that you personally consume do you think is true?
Well, first of all, I, as the spokesperson for the White House and for the president, try to have to get ahead of it, and you have to read everything. That includes the legacy media print papers to watching every cable station. If you come into my office in the we'll see a quad of every cable outlet on my television, and that also includes understanding the digital age and seeing what's happening on X and trending stories and picking that up. So my predecessor, Dana Perino, who's become a friend who worked for President Bush, told me there's no shortcut. You have to read it all. And so my office, we do that every single day, and the president does as well. Look, he is hostile with the media. There's no doubt about it. He calls them out, rightfully so, when he believes their stories are fake, when they are fake. And I also promised in my first briefing we would hold media accountable when they get things wrong. But we also do recognize and respect that legacy media is speaking to millions of Americans across the country, and we want them to get it right, which is why we engage with them so frequently every single day.
As you look around that room and you think about the country and you think about the truth, who do you feel comes closest to finding the closest approximation of the truth?
Well, it depends on the day, and it depends on the issue, and it depends on the story, right? And, you know, there are reporters who get it right sometimes. There's reporters who get it wrong sometimes, and we have to call them out. It just is what it is. I think the best reporters who cover the Trump beat and the Trump White House understand that you have to give us ample time to let us know what you're writing. Come to our office when you think of a story, when you come up with an idea to write about, and we can work with you to shape that story. We can get you the facts. Fake news is not just wrong information in a story, but it's also acting in bad faith as a reporter and not giving who you're writing about and your sources ample time to respond. There's nothing worse than when I see a reporter in my inbox 20 minutes before a deadline with an entire story written and panned out. That's acting in bad faith. They actually don't care what we have to say. They don't care about the facts in our point of view. They're just emailing us to check the box to say they reached out for comment. So that's fake news, not just, inaccuracies in their reporting as well.
So you just mentioned President Trump is a voracious consumer of news. You and your colleagues dog the media a lot, but the president devours the media. He loves the Time. Time magazine again this morning in an interview.
Cover story.
Watches Good Morning America Sunday. How do you square that with constant complaints?
Well, he has constant complaints because he watches everything and reads everything and consumes it all. But I think, again, it speaks to his transparency and accessibility. I mean, yesterday he sat down with Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic. And we all know the story that Jeffrey Goldberg at The Atlantic recently wrote. It was quite a big news cycle. But the fact that President Trump was willing to talk to a reporter who wrote a story that we absolutely disagreed with, and many stories that we absolutely disagree with, we have condemned because they are false, they are hoaxes. The fact that the president is still willing to welcome that reporter into the Oval Office to have a direct conversation with them is exactly what we should expect in a leader of the free world. And you had a previous president in Joe Biden who hid from the press, who didn't do press engagements, hardly did sit-down interviews. And so I think this is exactly what the American people want. President Trump has revolutionized the way a president communicates. Not only does he engage directly with reporters, but he speaks directly to the public. Truth Social, there's probably been one since I've been sitting on this stage, right? I mean, he puts statements out directly. He writes them himself. He dictates them to us as staff. And I think that level of transparency is quite refreshing, and I think it's a big reason he was reelected again.
How did the Atlantic interview go?
It was cordial. It was okay. And, there was disagreements. They are writing a story in which the reporting will be revealed, and I'll let you all read it.
And did the president make news?
He always makes news.
What did he
He's
say?
a newsmaker.
What did he say?
I won't get ahead of my boss, Mike Allen.
You've curtailed access to the Associated Press, which reaches half the world's population every day. The most definitive photo of President Trump, the fight, fight, fight photo after the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, was made by Evan Vucci, who's the chief photographer in Washington for the Associated Press. Do you worry about history being lost with these new restrictions?
I don't view them as restrictions. We view them as opening access to more outlets, more voices, more news journalists and outlets. We shouldn't have a few outlets who have a monopoly over the briefing room or over that 13-person press pool that covers the president. And so we've actually ensured that more print outlets, like Axios, have a greater chance of being part of that 13-person press pool. There are thousands of outlets who have White House press credentials. There are hundreds that actually show up every day and cover the beat. Why should a single outlet have the privilege of being in that 13-person press pool every single day? And so the changes we've made have actually created more transparency, more accessibility, and greater access for a broad variety of outlets and a diversity of journalists, which I think is a good thing. And we've seen that play out. I mean, we started this. I think you're all still getting your news, right? You're still hearing about what the administration is doing every single day because we have good journalists who are in that room covering the president every single time.
The counter to that is in a White House Correspondents Association statement about the White House changes to the position of wire services in the pool. And the statement says the government should not be able to control the independent media that covers it. Do you agree with that statement?
Well, I think that a small group of journalists who comprise the board of the White House Correspondents Association should not dictate who gets to go into the Oval Office and who gets to ride on Air Force One. There should be equal access for all outlets, and that's exactly what we're doing. And if we were trying, by the way, to create positive press for the president, if we were trying to make it easier on him or on the administration, we wouldn't allow some of these fake news leftist outlets in, but we continue to do that. No one has been restricted. We've just given more spots to more outlets and more voices. It's not about ideology. It's just about increasing the wide variety of outlets that have access. And we live in a digital age, and we're recognizing that at the White House. The president ran a non-traditional media campaign which propelled him back to the highest office in the land, and we felt it was our responsibility to continue that in our coverage at the White House.
Smart brevity. What is the one word that you would use to describe the media?
The media right now, exhausted and busy, because we're keeping them very busy.
And as you think about the 100 days, that milestone coming up Tuesday, what's the one word that you would use to describe President Trump's mood, approach, setting?
He is in problem solver mode right now. He inherited a lot of problems, no doubt about it. That's why, again, the American public elected him back to this city to solve those problems. And I watch him every day thinking about the challenges we are facing as a country and as a world, as big as the Russia-Ukraine conflict, which continues and he's focused on daily, which the trade deals that he's trying to negotiate abroad to problems as small as cleaning up the homeless encampments right here in Washington, D.C. He sees one, he calls the mayor's office, he gets it fixed. He is truly a problem solver at heart, and that's, I think, what drives him every day. He shows up early, he stays late, he works 24/7, hardly sleeps to just solve all of these problems, no matter how big or small, and that's, I think, really the mindset the president is in right now.
Bucket two, you. What is success for you in this job?
Success to me is being as, again, transparent, as accessible as we can, successfully messaging the president's perspective on the issues of the day. And I view that as my ultimate goal when I go to the podium, is knowing the news, knowing what reporters want to hear, knowing what the American public need to hear, and making sure that I'm talking to the president and reflecting exactly what he sees and thinks about the issues that are pressing our country.
How often does a question at a briefing surprise you?
Not very often, I must say. I have a very good staff, and I read everything. You have to, there's no shortcut for preparation. You have to read and consume all of the news. There have been times where I don't know the answer, and I am upfront about that in the briefing. And I say, look, I don't know where the president stands on that. Let me go check and get back to you. And by the way, in my office, we take pride in the fact that we do, in fact, follow up with the reporters after the briefing, and we try very hard to do that.
I mentioned you ran for Congress in 2022 in your beloved New Hampshire. What did you learn as a candidate that serves you as a communicator?
Sure. Well, being a communicator for yourself is certainly much different than being a communicator for a principal. In a way, it's actually much harder. Because when you're communicating for yourself, you're messaging what you believe, or when you're a candidate, you're thinking about what do my stakeholders believe, what do my constituents believe, what are my beliefs, what does the media think I'm going to say, but what do I want to say? And so you're grappling with all of those value sets and coming up with a decision and then messaging it, right? But when you're a communicator for someone else, for a principal, in my case, the President of the United States, my job now is to message his beliefs and his opinions and what the administration is doing and getting the truth out to the public. So in many ways, it's actually easier, because when you're a communicator for someone else, or for a business or a company, an organization, any principal at any level of government, you just have to get in their head and understand the message they want to say, and view yourself as the messenger for their cause.
Your approach at the podium indexes more toward combat than persuasion. How did
you think?
How did you come to that calibration?
Look, I think we live in a combative media environment that has come to fruition over many years. And I think while combative, it's also can be cordial. And again, while the president and I and our White House are the first to call out fake news, I believe as we should, we also try to work with our counterparts in the media to make sure the coverage is as accurate and fair and truthful as possible.
Who in the White House can say, Mr. President, I get where you're coming from, but that's dumb? Or, Mr. President, that could be dangerous?
Probably contrary to popular belief, everyone is invited to share their opinion.
Would you do that?
I have done that. I have said, sir, I don't disagree. I disagree with that, or I agree with that, or maybe we should say it this way, or we should put the statement out that way. And something that I think President Trump doesn't get enough credit for is his ability and willingness to listen. He is an incredible listener. And if anyone's ever been in a room with him, you know he goes to every person in that room to understand their perspective, and then he makes a decision. He doesn't care if you're the highest on the totem pole or the lowest. He likes to hear from people and understand where they're coming from and to help inform his decision. So he's always asking, not just me, but my colleagues at all levels, what we think, and he takes that into account when making decisions.
When you gave that tough advice, did he take it?
Depends which time. He's the decision maker.
You're quite open about your faith in a very secular job. How do you balance those parts of your brain and your soul?
Sure. Faith is surely what grounds me in as you said, a secular position and a challenging job and a challenging workplace. And having faith in yourself, but also in God, something bigger than yourself, I think helps keep perspective in this crazy, chaotic, 24/7 challenging environment that we work in. And it's very easy to get consumed by that. But I think having faith in God kind of brings you back down to reality, makes you remember this is a season of life. It's temporary, and gives you good perspective.
This is a weekend that celebrates a free press and the power of the First Amendment. Do you wrestle with whether any of this administration's policies have been impinged on a free press or the First Amendment?
No, again, I would...
You don't wrestle with it?
Well, we always want to respect the First Amendment, but I don't wrestle with the fact that we're infringing on the First Amendment in any way, because I don't believe that we are. Again, we have a president who speaks to the press daily, who puts out statements daily. The press are hearing from someone in this administration, whether it be the president or me or our cabinet officials, every single day. I mean, the president has now held 3 cabinet meetings in which he invited the press in, and he went around the room, and each and every cabinet official at the highest level of our government directly informed the American public about what they were doing in their respective jobs. And that's very exciting to see, to have a government that's so passionate about the work they're doing and so upfront in messaging it.
What could the media do to improve public trust?
Report the facts, report the truth. It is true, there's no doubt that the majority of the legacy media in this city are left-leaning. And anyone who wants to take me to task on that, I am more than happy to do so. It's just a fact. So I think, again, we have to welcome a wide range of media voices, but we also have to continue to work with our counterparts in the media, especially those who are left-leaning, to ensure that they understand
Make it sound like a ministry.
Our perspective. What was that?
You make it sound like a ministry.
Well, we just want to get the truth out there, and we want to make sure that the public sees it and sees what we're doing with no bias, unfiltered, just the facts.
One for the road, the official Trump store is now selling hats that say Trump 2028, $50. Even though the Constitution doesn't envision a term 3 for President Trump or any president, is that just a hat?
It's just a hat. The president was asked and answered this question yesterday. It's not something he's thinking of, though I hear the hats are flying off the shelves.
And finally, you're an athlete into fitness. You were a college softball player. What's your current favorite health hack?
Oh, I wish I had more time for health and fitness these days. I did play college softball. I played sports my whole life. I think athletics prepares you for the game of politics in many ways. Discipline, hard work, teamwork. I wish I had more time for the gym these days, but I enjoy long walks in the city. DC is beautiful, and I have a young son who I enjoy taking out for walks any chance I can get.
Thank you to our hosts at the International Spy Museum, to the incredible Axios events team, to C-SPAN, to all of you personally and virtually for your early morning, and Karoline Leavitt, thanks for a great conversation.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
I can't help but get excited when I think about the idea of transparency in the White House. It's a subject that's been tossed around for ages, but in the Trump administration, it became something of a buzzword, one that the administration, in many ways, took to new heights. Whether you like or dislike the man, you can't deny that his administration did things differently, radically different. So when the speaker talks about unprecedented transparency, I find myself wondering just how much of it was actually transparent and how much was simply strategic access management. Let's dive in. The speaker sets the stage for an interesting discussion. Transparency is not just about openness in policy, it's about how the media and the public engage with the White House. I can practically hear the tone of excitement in the speaker's voice as they reflect on how much access there was to the inner workings of the administration. But like many things in politics, there's always more than meets the eye, and this transparency comes with its own complex set of rules. From daily briefings to access to the Oval Office, let's take a closer look at the multifaceted role transparency played under President Trump. The true meaning of transparency, a new era in political communication? Let me start by saying this. When the speaker talks about the level of transparency being unprecedented, I totally get it. This administration made it a priority to provide real-time access to the White House, something I haven't seen before. We all know that when Obama was in office, and even before that, transparency was always a talking point, but the Trump administration took it to another level. They opened the doors of the White House and welcomed the media in like never before. It was like opening the floodgates to a whole new world of communication. But then I have to ask, is transparency truly transparent, or is it just a clever way of managing the narrative? Here's where it gets interesting. Transparency in government isn't just about showing the public what you want them to see. It's about control too, and let me tell you, Trump was great at controlling the narrative. The speaker paints the picture of a press room where media outlets have access to the administration on a regular basis. This level of access was definitely a game changer. Journalists weren't just given brief snippets here and there. They were at the White House every single day. This wasn't a one-off, "Oh, we'll give you a briefing if you're lucky" kind of situation. No, the media were expected to show up, ask questions, and get their answers. But here's the catch. Does providing the media with access automatically make it transparent? I'm skeptical. Transparency isn't just about giving access, it's about the quality of the information being provided. Were journalists getting the full story, or were they just handed the version that the administration wanted to sell? After all, providing access could very easily be a way to control the flow of information. You see, the problem lies in the details. The real question is, how much of what was shared actually represented the truth? The press secretary, the gatekeeper of transparency. Speaking of controlling information, I can't help but focus on the role of the White House press secretary. That person is a pivotal figure. In this analysis, I'm taking on the role of the press secretary myself, and let me tell you, it's not easy. The speaker emphasizes the importance of the press secretary in facilitating communication between the administration and the media. It's like being the conductor of a symphony. The press secretary has to make sure everything flows seamlessly, getting the president's message out while also handling the chaos that can erupt when reporters start asking tough questions. I can't help but feel a sense of admiration for those who take on this role. They get a front row seat to the workings of the most powerful office in the world. But at the same time, they're under an immense amount of pressure to defend the administration, even when the media hurls tough questions their way. It's like trying to juggle flaming swords while riding a unicycle. But this also brings us to a crucial point. While the press secretary does their best to make things run smoothly, they are still part of a system that controls the narrative. That's a lot of responsibility. The speaker hints at how the press secretary is supposed to offer honest communication to the public, and while that may sound noble, we all know that sometimes the truth gets distorted in the process. I've been in enough high-stakes communication situations to know that sometimes things are left out, or certain details are adjusted to fit a particular narrative. And I can tell you this, no one can fully escape the push and pull of strategic messaging. The job is tough, but it also requires a certain level of manipulation to get the message across in the way that the administration wants. Access, access, and more access, but is it enough? Now, let's talk about the quantity of access that the media had to the White House. When the speaker mentions that the media were granted daily access to the White House, I can't help but think, wow, that's impressive. After all, not every administration has been as open in terms of briefings and availability of officials for interviews. It was as though the press was getting an all-access pass to one of the most coveted places on earth, the heart of the US government. But the question I keep coming back to is, just because journalists are allowed to be in the room, does that mean they're really getting the full picture? In a situation where the president is constantly under fire, the information shared may be carefully curated and sometimes filtered to avoid potential damage to the administration's image. Yes, journalists were there every day, but were they being given everything they needed to form an unbiased, comprehensive view? Or were they just getting snippets of a story, with gaps that left them questioning the truth? It's a tricky thing to balance. New voices, shifting the media dynamics, One of the most interesting parts of the speaker's analysis is the mention of new voices in the press room. As someone who's always interested in the power dynamics between the media and government, this caught my attention. The Trump administration didn't just rely on the traditional voices that had been part of the White House press corps for decades. They invited new voices, people who weren't afraid to ask tough questions, or in some cases, who may have been more sympathetic to the president's agenda. I think this is where things get really fascinating. The dynamics of a press room filled with both veteran reporters and newcomers create an environment where traditional methods of reporting might clash with newer, more unconventional approaches. I can only imagine the tension that must have existed in those briefings between the seasoned journalists who were used to holding power to account and the newcomers who might have been more open to the president's narrative. But I also think this shift represents something even bigger. It's a reflection of how media is evolving. We're no longer just relying on mainstream outlets to tell the stories. The White House press room, under the Trump administration, became a microcosm of a much larger shift in the media landscape, where new voices, social media influencers, and alternative news outlets all started to gain prominence. In that sense, the media environment was becoming more democratic, but also more fragmented. The question then becomes, can we still trust the traditional press when new voices are calling the shots? The limits of transparency. Despite all the fanfare around transparency, the speaker touches on something very real. There are limits to what the White House will share. Transparency in this context is about selective openness. As much as the administration touted its accessibility and openness, there were moments when the speaker pointed out that they had to curate the information being shared. What does that really mean? It means that even in an era of open access, there are things the administration chooses not to share, or things that are manipulated to avoid any damage to the president's image. This is where the conversation takes a bit of a darker turn. If transparency is about honesty and full disclosure, can we truly say the Trump administration was transparent when certain facts were often left out, or when alternative facts were presented? It's a hard pill to swallow, but it's also a reality in the world of political communication. And the thing is, while the administration may have granted access to the press, they still had an iron grip on what was being shared. This balancing act between transparency and control is a theme that runs through every White House, but under Trump, it was amplified in ways that left people questioning the authenticity of the transparency being presented. Conclusion: transparency with a twist. So here's where I land after diving into all of this. Transparency in the Trump White House wasn't exactly transparent in the way that we traditionally think about it. Sure, there were press briefings, daily access, and a more open channel between the White House and the media than in previous administrations. But what did this really mean? Was it true transparency, or was it a carefully controlled illusion designed to paint the administration in the best possible light? For me, transparency in politics is about more than just access. It's about trust, accountability, and honesty. And while the Trump administration might have opened the doors to the White House, there was still a lot of behind-the-scenes maneuvering to ensure that the information being shared served a specific purpose. In the end, transparency wasn't just about access, it was about controlling the narrative, shaping the message, and presenting a version of reality that worked for the administration. Looking back, I can't help but feel a little conflicted. On the one hand, there was more access than ever before. On the other hand, the selective nature of the transparency left me wondering if I was getting the full story. It's a delicate dance, and I think that's what makes this topic so fascinating. The lines between transparency and manipulation are often blurred, and the Trump administration mastered that art in ways I hadn't seen before.